All right, guys, what's up? How y'all doing this morning?
Pretty good.
What's up, guys?
It's rocking and rolling.
Toby Keith, man.
Yeah, I know, man. Got sad news. Found out Toby Keith passed away this morning. Country music singer. I mean, God, I grew up listening to him. I mean, every time we were around water, it seems like I was listening to Toby Keith. Just a sad deal. Had cancer, I believe, right, David?
I think so.
I didn't even know he was sick.
Yeah, he's been sick for a while. I know he's been losing a lot of weight. We lost a real one, man.
Yeah,
legend in the game.
For sure. R.I.P. Toby Keith, one of the best. Got a fun fact this morning, Dave?
We got a fun fact for you guys. All right, if the 49ers win the Super Bowl this weekend, Christian and Ed McCaffrey can become the second father and son duo to win a Super Bowl with the same franchise. Ed McCaffrey won a Super Bowl with the 49ers in 1995. Then he won back-to-back with Denver. So the only other father and son duo to ever win a Super Bowl with the same franchise, Steve and Zach DiOssi with the Giants. They were long snappers.
Nice.
The long snapper.
That's the only other
one. I think there are 6 total father and son duos to win Super Bowls, but only one with the same franchise. So Christian McCaffrey and Ed McCaffrey can become the second.
How
duo.
Sick would that be to win a Super Bowl with the same team your dad won?
It's awesome.
That is nice.
Awesome.
Another great fun fact there, David. Ohio State may be looking for a new offensive coordinator if Bill O'Brien leaves to take the BC job. Dartmouth basketball players are trying to ruin college sports, and Tim Brando joins us to discuss the new partnership between the Big Ten and the SEC. I'm Jay Crane, and welcome to Crane & Company. If Ohio State wins the national championship next year, they won't be the only team to ever buy a championship. To be honest, they would actually join a long list of teams that have paid for talent to step on campus. Yes, it's believed the cost of their big-time transfer portal acquisitions like Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, and more has been estimated to cost around 10 to 13 million bucks. But even before NIL was made public, most of the top teams in college football paid for recruits under the table. Now, look, some people don't like to talk about it like it's taboo or something, and there are some programs that tried to stay somewhat clean. But if we are going to be honest with ourselves, we all know what was going on. Your team was doing it too. Not only were recruits getting paid to attend the school, but the guys on the current roster would get thrown some coin on a lot of teams. I mean, hell, my father, may he rest in peace, told me stories all the time about finding envelopes in his locker after the games where he played well at Auburn. I mean, the biggest change is the high value that guys are getting paid right now. I mean, back in the day, if a recruit got paid by multiple schools, he could rack up a pretty nice price tag. And once he chose a school on signing day, he would just keep all the money. Because what are they going to do? Tell on them? I mean, they were the ones that paid him. But we haven't seen guys going for a mill at this rate ever before. And Ohio State isn't the only school doing it. But Ryan Day and the crew in Columbus, they've got to do something. Because when you sign up to be the head man for the Buckeyes, you can't keep losing to Michigan, regardless of what else you accomplish outside of maybe winning a natty. So while it may seem desperate, it looks like it's working out. It's a smart play. If you can't beat them, then buy them. But if he doesn't get it done this year at home against a Michigan team that's lost more experience than Drew Barrymore in 51st dates, it could get real weird real quick. Bring in my co-host, David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback. I'm sure he's got an interesting take on this. My brother, former Western Colorado wide receiver, Blaine Crane. David, when you look at what Ohio State has done through the transfer portal, Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, Will Howard, go down the list. The guys that return on defense. Like I said yesterday, it's going to be very hard for me not to pencil in Ohio State to at least make the national championship game. But do you think this is a new thing in college football, or it's just a new way to do it out in the public? Jimbo Fisher did say, we've been doing NIL for a long time. y'all just started finding out about it.
First of all, I never got an envelope, so I can only assume that Michigan never played any players ever in the history of the program. So it's good to know that they're doing things the right way in Ann Arbor. But in Columbus right now, man, there just seems to be a real sense of urgency. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is motivated by Michigan coming off a national championship, 3 straight conference championships by the Wolverines, and that's great to see. That's great. I mean, we've watched it with Auburn and Alabama for over a decade, the back and forth, and Auburn winning the 2010 national championship sandwiched between Alabama winning 2 or 3. So I love to see it in terms of paying the players to get there. Look, I think that Ryan Day is just utilizing every mechanism that is allowed right now to be able to put together the best roster possible. They go on the road to Oregon this year. That's going to be a big game. You know, they're going to get the Wolverines at home with new coach Sharon Moore. That's going to be interesting to see just because of the intensity of the rivalry. You don't have to go undefeated anymore is another great thing. I mean, the Buckeyes are going to benefit greatly from not having these divisions. And one of those 2 schools, Oregon or Michigan, they may match up with again, not just in the conference championship, but in the college football playoff. So I think Ryan Day is doing all the right things. There's a sense of urgency. New offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien may leave to be the new head coach at Boston College. I know he has ties to Boston and he has a situation with his son there with the hospital. So expect that news to break one way or another in the next couple of days. But even if Bill O'Brien decides not to be the offensive coordinator there, I don't think it's a huge loss. Yeah, we already talked about how weird it was. The Buckeyes are going to go where Will Howard takes them. How dominant is he going to be? And then to me, if in terms of your question of will they win a national championship, how dominant is Georgia going to be?
Without a doubt.
Georgia's the other best roster in the country.
And I mean, we're to a 12-team playoff now, so you can take a couple hits with the schedule like Ohio State has, and you win late, you can get in there and then make a run. You know, right now I'm leaning toward picking them to win the Big Ten. But Blaine, when you look at Michigan, they're about to go from their strongest point to kind of a transitory period with what they're losing, not only from a personnel standpoint on the field, but on the sidelines as well with Jim Harbaugh, obviously going to the NFL. I know Sharon Moore has a lot of experience, but if Ohio State is going to flip this thing back, at least for a year, at least to give Ryan Day some breathing room in this rivalry game, you are not going to catch Michigan at a weaker point than you will next year. New quarterback, new leaders, Blake Corum's gone, new guys on the offensive line. I already talked about Jim Harbaugh. This is the time, and it seems like Ohio State is going all in to build a Frankenstein team, kind of like we're seeing with Ole Miss, right? We saw it with Texas State. Colorado tried to do it in year 1. Just what are your thoughts on where Ohio State is going into this year with Ryan Day?
Well, I will say this. If you're Ohio State and you're Ryan Day, and if you don't beat Michigan and don't make a run in the playoffs, I believe you will not be the head coach.
What if you lose to Michigan but make a run in the playoffs and lose?
I think you will be depending on how far the run is, will depend if Ryan Day will be the head coach. I think if you lose the game before the Natty or something like that, I do think you will come back. They need that. You spent $13 million in NIL, and I kind of go back to the A&M team with Jimbo Fisher, and I know that's different because it's recruiting. One thing I worry about when it comes to stuff like this is how many personalities can you put in a locker room before it becomes toxic, before it becomes dangerous. You go look at the Junkins kid at Ole Miss, phenomenal talent. Things weren't going well between him and Lane Kiffin and those teams and that staff at Ole Miss. So you can have the great players, and it kind of makes me think about the NBA teams, right? The Warriors, who drafted their talent, a cohesion of talent through the years that built together. You can buy all the talent, that's fine, but how good is your locker room? Because there's going to be games where you're down 10 in the fourth, where you have to come together, and you have to have that drive. Talent's one thing, but leadership's another.
Yeah, and I can understand what you're saying. Here's where I differ on the Texas A&M situation, and then I'm going to get to Ole Miss. We want to know what you think. Phone lines are going to open at 7:15 a.m. Central. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. A&M had a culture problem. They weren't winning before that. Ohio State has won so much, even though they've struggled against Michigan. Go look at their winning percentage. That is a winning tradition and a winning locker room. So you're either going to blend into that, or they've got guys that can replace you. They're that talented. I mean, look what their return on defense. I'm not as worried. I think the Texas A&M comparisons aren't close, right? I really don't. I think the Ole Miss comparisons, I see what you're saying about Quinshon Judkins, and I get that with the Ole Miss, but let's be honest, where Ohio State is and where Ole Miss has been, I know Ole Miss just beat them in a bowl game. Again, that winning culture in that locker room has been kind of formulated through the way they've recruited. A lot of the guys that are their best players are guys that they recruited. So I think it'd be easier to blend in some of these personalities right, with the locker room that Ohio State has. When it comes to what happens to Ryan Day, I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because if you do lose to Michigan and you do make the Final Four, let's say in the first year of the 12-team playoff, I still don't think that's enough. I think if he
enough
loses
to fire him, or
that's where I'm stuck between the rock and the hard place, because what happens if the Bears job opens with the Eberflus? What happens if there's another big job? Let's say Florida opens or something like that. Is there kind of a mutual parting of the ways between Ryan Day and Ohio State? Not a firing, not a, hey, listen, you've got to get on the raft. We're going to light the torches and push it into the river. But hey, man, this obviously isn't working out at the most important level. Mm-hmm. You've done a really good job. You have a top 5 winning percentage, but you're not winning the game that matters the most. Is there some mutual parting of the ways, whether that be college or the NFL? Because I just don't. It'd be tough for me to see them firing him, right? But I wouldn't be surprised if it was like, hey, we need some fresh blood in here.
I think whether or not Ryan Day coaches in the NFL, and I think the same thing about Lincoln Riley, whether those two guys end up coaching in the NFL will be totally dictated by their desire to coach in the NFL. Now, it would be a bad loss to lose to Michigan again this year, because you're starting to set up a narrative where, man, we can't even beat Michigan once Jim Harbaugh leaves and they're in a transitory period. If they go 12-2 and lose to Georgia in the semifinal or the national championship, like, they're just not moving off of Ryan Day. You know, it's just going to be a lot of what we've seen the past couple of years, a lot of complaining that they can't get over that hump. But again, look to the north. Look to what Michigan was on the cusp of firing Jim Harbaugh. Should we move off of a guy? And he probably only got his job saved because he played quarterback there, and that was his alma mater. And look, it turned out to be the right thing. So I wouldn't be, too hasty in firing a coach who has a top 5 win percentage. On the NBA or the basketball thing, I love the basketball analogy, because we've seen this at the NBA level and at the college level before. Like, you can't just buy a team by putting the best superstars on. Look at what happened with the Brooklyn Nets. It was an absolute disaster. But with basketball, you're running 5 guys out on the court, maybe 10 play throughout a game. In football, you're going to run 45 guys out there to play every single Saturday. And the biggest thing for the Buckeyes to me right now is not getting those couple big SEC pieces they added with Caleb Downs and Quinshon Judkins. It's all the guys who decided to return because they lost to Michigan and didn't win the championship.
No, without a doubt, I do think it is a good blend. I do think they have enough of developed talent where, you're not just too heavy on the not prima donnas that come in, but kind of the new faces that have been in the news and that everybody's heard about and everybody's talking about. And they're smart to spend the money. I think this is a very smart play by Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when you're playing poker, you got to push all the chips to the middle. You got to call C.J. Stroud. I need that $50,000. Mm-hmm. You got to call other guys. We got to make our push now. And look, you got to wait till they fly off the river and see what happens.
First of all, I love a good Texas Hold'em analogy. Thank you. And when you said C.J. Stroud's name, that reminded me of a point that I wanted to make in this segment, which is one thing to keep in mind, the Buckeyes having elite talent has never been the problem, though. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. So when we talk about, man, they're getting all these good players and they're returning talent.
But they raised that elite talent. They didn't go get that elite talent out of the transfer portal. They brought that through up recruiting. So now you bring that up through recruiting and you add this new piece, this new blend with these new guys, which is the complete different reason on why you've been successful. If there's anything that can put a cog into the machine, it's this. Well, that's the reason I put that A&M comp in there.
Yeah.
There's a reason Ryan Day and Ohio State, before Ryan Day has been all this successful, it is because of culture. But now there's a new culture getting brought into a locker room with a bunch of recruits that you promise a lot of things. So and look, these guys talk and these guys have personalities. So Ohio State's going to be really good, but we're talking about getting them over the hump.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, we got to remember Texas A&M brought in a bunch of recruits. Like, it wasn't like Texas A&M went to the transfer portal and brought in 40 guys. They signed a bunch of 5-stars. They had the number 1 recruiting class in the country. They paid for a bunch of high school kids. Caleb Downs isn't a high school kid. Caleb Downs is coming from Alabama. This man's about business. I'm not worried about Caleb Downs going in that locker room and going with Denzel and all those other guys. He's going to be fine. Will Howard is going to be better than Kyle McCord. He just is. He's an experienced quarterback. I'm not worried about Will Howard going in there and being a prima donna. Quinshon Judkins, we'll see. But guess what? The great part about Ohio State, they got plenty of guys that can run the ball. I'm not worried about guys that can run the ball. But there's a big difference, I think, in bringing in veteran guys that have played in big games that are more mature than signing a 17, 18-year-old kid for this crazy amount of money who's going to college for the first time, and then you've got a bunch of them and you promised them they're all going to start. I think those are two totally different things. And if you look at the volume of the amount of players that Texas A&M signed in that vein as opposed to what Ohio State's brought in, to me it's not even close. And you mix that with the culture. I just think they're in two totally different circumstances. Ohio State just went what, David? 11-2?
Yeah, after the loss to Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean these guys have won, and you're just adding a couple really big pieces, really expensive pieces. But look, you want the living room to look nice. You know, I don't know, buy you some nice furniture. Go to one of those expensive ass furniture stores. But we want to know what you think before we get to the Booster Club. Look, guys, we know the Super Bowl is coming up. Okay, we're going to live stream it. We hope you guys join us. We know that you're probably going to indulge in some adult beverages. Maybe a cold soda, maybe a little bit of brown water. But this weekend isn't just about football. All right, you can't forget about the halftime show, the commercials. Please be funny. The food and the drinks that we're going to have. And most importantly, preparing for the weekend now by securing your own Z-Biotics. What is Z-Biotics? Pretty simple, guys. You drink it before you go drink, and you don't feel as bad the next day. I can promise you that. We have tested this product before, enjoyed testing it out. It works. It's like magic. It's the closest thing you'll ever get to Hogwarts. All right, it's a pre-alcohol probiotic. David, you've tried it before. You drink it before you drink. It attacks that toxic byproduct in your gut because, didn't know this, I'm not a scientist, but I thought you get dehydrated. That's why you feel bad the next day. That's not it. It's a toxic byproduct. Well, these geniuses over here figured it out at Z-Biotics. They produce an enzyme to break it down. So, what do you got to do? Go to zbiotics.com/booster to get 15% off your first order with that code BOOSTER, BOOSTER at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked, but you're going to be super duper satisfied. That's zbiotics.com/booster, zbiotics.com/booster. Use our code BOOSTER at checkout for 15% off your first order. Fantastic product. And also, Cone, you were wearing the Crane & Company hoodie this morning.
Oh, yes, I was.
Looking good. We're going to throw the link for that in the chat. We'd appreciate it. All right, let's get to the Booster Club.
Let's go to the Green Soldier. What is up, my guy? What if Oregon beats Ohio State early on October? Can we see a spiral starting? I don't know how I feel about Day coaching a defensive-led football team.
Well, I mean, you kind of look at Ohio State this past year. I feel like they were defensive-led. It's a 12-team playoff. There's no reason for anybody to panic early. So if you drop a game to Oregon, who's going to be highly ranked, or you know, a team that is, you know, to use a basketball term, has a good Ken Pom, you're going to be fine. You still got a chance. That's what makes the 12-team playoff the most interesting to me. Now 9-3 could be sexy again at the end of the year. I mean, you could literally have teams that are, you know, 8-3 and 9-2 playing each other in the last weekend of the year, which we would say, oh, well, this game's going to be a fun game to watch, but there's really not a lot of you know, consequences either way outside of maybe going to a better bowl game. Now it's like, guys, we win one more game, we could sneak in here to the playoff. And we're going to start hearing terms on the bubble, seeding, things like that. I'm wondering if Joe Lunardi is working on something right now as we're going, a guy that we've had on the show before. But the early loss, there shouldn't be any panic. Now, if you just get absolutely drugged or you haven't looked good the first 3 or 4 weeks, that's kind of a different story. But if you drop a big game early, I mean, you're still in the fight.
All right, let's go to Bradley D. What is up? He says, even with all the transfers for Ohio State, I do not believe in Ryan Day can win the big games on the schedule.
I mean, Ryan Day's won big games before, though. Like, let's remember, before Jim Harbaugh flipped it, all right, Ryan Day was doing his thing too. So if it can flip one way, it can flip the other. But when you look at all the categories going into this year, you know, balanced team, offense, defense, special teams, Ohio State has it. Experience, Ohio State has it. Chip on their shoulder, Ohio State has it. Home field advantage, Ohio State has it. I feel like it's all leaning toward Ohio State, but they've got to do it this year. Like, on one hand, yes, that's great, but the desperation and the pressure is at an all-time high. I mean, do you agree with me on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Again, it just happens to be happening at a time in a year where there are so many other changes. The playoff is tripling. New teams are coming into the conference. There's already a bunch of unknowns. So that kind of has to make you pause and say, man, how much of what the Buckeyes achieved this season is because of the new layout of college football? But again, they're going to be, look, here's their schedule, man. we talked about them going on the road to Oregon, but they play Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, Michigan State, Iowa, then they go on the road to Oregon. Then they follow that up with Nebraska at home. They do travel to Penn State. They get Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, and then they play Michigan at home. Like, they're going to be competing for the
that smells like at worst. That smells like at worst 10-2.
And when they make the playoff, and again, it's 12 teams next year, so there's going to be a lot of fun, and there's going to be teams with home field advantage and all that kind of stuff. When they do, you're giving yourself a chance to win a national championship.
I agree.
All right, let's go to S. Boone. He says, is this the mercenary era where players go where the money is best, and how long is the era before the players unionize? Just thinking about the story about Dartmouth.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. Remember, if you donate and it's on topic, it's going to be read. I forgot to say that earlier. Here's where I'm at with the mercenary thing. Players have always been going where the money is. Most of the time, even when guys were getting paid under the table, they would go to the team that offered them the most money. That's just how it worked. Now we're seeing that in the public eye, and it's mixed with the transfer portal. See, that's the difference, right? Because a proven commodity is more valuable than a projected commodity because you know what you're getting. That's why guys make more money on that second NFL contract if they do well than they do on that first one. Why? Because you are a proven commodity. I know what Will Howard is at the Power 5 level. I know what Quinshon Judkins is at the Power 5 level. Same thing with Caleb Downs. A kid coming out of high school, I can project that, and that's great. I may be right, I may be wrong, but it is not a proven commodity. Same thing in the NFL. If I sign a free agent, I know what I am getting with that player at the NFL level. If I draft a guy, I am projecting what I think I am getting from that player coming from the college level. So obviously the proven commodity is going to cost more, right? If I buy a race car that's won a bunch of races, that's going to cost me a lot more than one that hasn't taken a lap yet in a meaningful race. That's just how the world works.
All right, let's go to Danny. He says, if Ohio State and Ole Miss are more successful than schools that are building through recruitment such as Georgia and LSU, then do Kirby and BK have to adapt their philosophy on the transfer portal?
No. Look, we can't. I don't think we can compare Ohio State to Ole Miss. I feel like Ole Miss has brought in a lot more guys through the transfer portal than Ohio State has. When you look, the difference is Ohio State's just brought in like all the top guys. They've got the most expensive guys. Not that Ole Miss hasn't got good transfers, and they have some transfers that went there last year that are staying for another year. Ohio State didn't go get 30 transfers to the transfer portal. They're not overhauling the team. They're not doing what Colorado or Texas State did last year, or even what Ole Miss is doing. They just got like 4 of the top guys because they paid the most. So to me, I want to make sure we understand that Ohio State has developed guys. Go look at their roster. A lot of guys that are returning on defense are developed. They had, 2 new tackles and a new center last year? Like, they have developed them. They are filling holes in the ship with guys from the transfer portal. All right, one more.
All right, let's go to Matt. He says, this may be a rough take, but I don't really think Will Howard is that much of an upgrade over McCord, if an upgrade at all. I'm just saying.
We'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see. But I would lean toward he would at least be somewhat of an upgrade. And if he's somewhat of an upgrade, I mean, remember, you got Igbuka coming back, right, as well. You look at what they have in the backfield. You look at what they have on the offensive line.
That was my point, is like them having great players has not been the issue. They've always had great players. I mean, look at that offense they had with C.J. Stroud when they had Chris Olave on that team, Garrett Wilson on that team, Jackson Smith and Jigba. They've always had great running backs. So it's not like, they're finally bringing in all the best players now because they've decided to spend money. They've always had the best players. So maybe there is something to, hey, can Ryan Day get over that big game hump?
We do have Tim Brando joining us at 7:10, but I'm going to get into a little rapid fire here, Dave.
All right, let's do it. First one up, they alluded to it in the Booster Club. A National Labor Relations Board regional official has ruled that Dartmouth basketball players are employees of the school, clearing the way for an election that would create the first labor union for NCAA athletes. All 15 members of the Dartmouth men's basketball team signed a petition in September asking to join the local 560. Remember, we talked about that story when it happened. Okay, a few things here to keep in mind. One, we saw this with Northwestern football back in 2015. That was pre-NIL era. That was pre the NCAA losing some of these big court cases across the country. The thing with that is Northwestern was the only private school in the Big Ten. So the National Labor Relations Board decided not to act because all of the other schools within the conference were public schools. Here, Dartmouth is an Ivy League school. All of these institutions are private. And keep in mind, no scholarships are given in the Ivy League. So these basketball players are paying tuition. They're paying for this experience to go to Dartmouth and play basketball, but now want to be considered employees. Now, there's a lot of people around the country who are pro player compensation. Like, I think all of us want athletes to be able to share in revenue who see this as a win. I don't necessarily see it that way, just for the factual, case of the matter here is that if you're paying to go to the school, you're not by definition an employee. What do you think?
Look, this is something that we've talked about. Will they be considered employees? Will they unionize? You tweeted out something I thought yesterday that was very smart. It's like, it's going to be sad when Dartmouth basketball gets canceled because they don't make any money.
Yeah.
Like, you want to get paid. Well, we talk about this in the real world, right? You're going to get paid most of the time what your value is and what you're bringing, right? Are you making a profit? Why are we seeing college football go to this new governing body with the SEC and the Big Ten, which we're going to talk about with Tim Brando? Well, they need to turn into a even more for-profit, situation. What I don't understand here, and you've talked about this too, David, is so if you're a scholarship athlete, take Dartmouth out of it, right? Of course, the Ivy League would start this and try and screw everything up. It's just what they do. It's amazing. It's the collection of the dumbest smart people of all time, outside of the NCAA. But what happens if you're on scholarship? Do you now still get your school paid for if there's a rev share? Like if you go to Mississippi State and you're the TV deal, you're a football player and school's getting $60 million, whatever it is, and you get a share of that. Now, does your room and board get paid for?
Or your food?
Your travel? Or your scholarship? Because to me, if you're an employee of the school and you're getting paid by the school, your ass ain't on scholarship too. Yeah. Like you can't have your cake and eat it too. So again, I'll say the same thing about these NIL contracts. At some point, they've got to be two-sided. At some point, the player's got to have some sort of mandate where they got to stay there a certain amount of time, or they have to pay the money back, or it's a breach of contract. Well, with this, if you're a scholarship guy and you want to get paid a rev share, you want to be employees, okay. There's two sides of business. You get a salary, that scholarship's gone. I think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, so Blaine, that's what I was alluding to when I tweeted, like, it's going to be a shame when the Dartmouth men's basketball team no longer exists and you've lost this opportunity because it operates at a financial loss, right? Now, the two likely outcomes of this are either one, Dartmouth just says, hey, let's be a leader in this space and let's use our endowment from donations that we get and just continue to allow the men's basketball team to operate at a financial loss like they have been doing. They lose a couple $100,000 every year. And we'll just call the kids employees, and there's not going to be any difference.
WNBA.
Yeah. Or what the students are saying is, or the student athletes are saying is, well, we don't want to be told what to do and when to do it. You dictating what time we have to be where and practice and show up to this game is by definition you being our employer, which as someone who owned a business, the distinction between employee and independent contractor is real one. It is a legal definition. But in this sense, if you go that route, you're nothing more than an intramural team.
No, you're basically a rec team.
Yeah.
That's basically what you are. And we saw this coming. You saw this coming a while ago with that get off my lawn. At some point, this was going to happen. Of course, it was Dartmouth, but they will do exactly what you just said. They'll bring whatever donations to pay for this basketball team who hasn't done anything for years. So at this point, does school even matter anymore?
Well,
look, this is what it is. School, education does not matter to these guys.
Well, at what point, and I'm going to be honest with you, we saw this with some pretty high-level college basketball teams. Guys just weren't going to class.
Sure.
They just show up and not play. So I'm telling you, the term student athlete may get retired here soon. It really may get, because what's going to stop me from just not going to class?
Yeah.
I'm an employee. Y'all pay me to play football. Y'all pay me to play basketball. Y'all don't pay me to go to chemistry class. Like, will there be and if the NCAA is gone, what is this new governing body going to be like? Well, you better maintain a 2.5 GPA or you're ineligible.
But a case could be made now that just a non-athlete student, just a regular student at a university is also an employee because they're dictated what time they have to go to class, where that class is going to be, the curriculum, the student handbook.
I disagree with you there because they're not doing anything extra outside of just being a student.
Again, they're being told, like when they go take the class, what room that class is in. They're given a handbook that they have to sign. Look, of course, I'm just taking this as far. I'm not even taking this as far as an attorney's going to take it when they get into the classroom. Like, those are the type of things that are going to come up when we start arguing over the semantics and the vocabulary of, well, what technically is an employee? Now, it's different at Alabama football or Duke basketball.
Yeah.
Those places are driving profit and driving revenue. But the Dartmouth kids are saying, we don't care if the basketball team turns a profit. All we care is, does it bring in any revenue whatsoever? And you get to tell us what time to be here to practice.
This is probably a pipe dream, but is there a world in which you only get a rev share, or you're only considered an employee, or you can only unionize if your sport is for profit? If you make money, you can't slice it like that.
Well, that's life. Like, how can, look, here's what it says in the article. Unionizing would allow the Dartmouth basketball players to negotiate not only over salary, but working conditions, including practice hours and travel. Well, to your point, negotiate over salary. Like, let's play this out. Let's just say, okay, you're employees now. You're labeled employees. What right do they now have that they didn't have before? All 15 players could have gone into the coach's office and said, we're not playing unless you pay us each $300,000 for our NIL. And the coach would have laughed at him. We don't have the money, and we're not getting it out of our donations to pay you. You're not making a profit. You're not doing anything. And then they go on to the next one. Okay, well, we want, let's say, free health care. And then they can negotiate over that. You could have already done that. I watched Rudy when all the guys went in there and put their jerseys and said, all of us are going to collectivize and not play unless you let Rudy play and dress for the game. You already had that leverage. So now you're being called employees. I don't understand what you're going to get out of it. Now, again, North Carolina basketball, that's different. Duke basketball, Kansas basketball, this is a whole different situation in the Ivy League to me.
Man, just wild. We're going to keep our eye on it, see how it goes. It's going to get appealed. But, I mean, I don't see the athletes losing a court case. I don't see them getting ruled against in the society we live in.
Yeah.
Like, they're just going to be, oh, no, well, it's persecution. You know, you got a bunch of different people, white people, black people, all this stuff. It's persecution of the athlete. It's, again, at some point, it's got to be balanced out, man.
All right, next one up here. That thing that never happens in our society, it's happening again, because a New Hampshire trans athlete, this is a male track star, is now favored to win the state championship meet this upcoming weekend in girls track and field.
You know. And we've talked about this a ton. We've had Riley Gaines on. This is about as, to me, this isn't a political issue. This is just, like, it's not political for me to look both ways before I cross the street. It's a safety thing. Here's another angle of this I've looked at, David. And we talked about this a little bit, I think, down in Mobile. But if you're the parents of this guy, like, how do you show up to the track meet or the game or whatever, surrounded by the other parents, and watch your son go beat a bunch of girls? Like, if you're the father of this young man, how do you show up and hold your head up high? Like how does that work? How embarrassing would that be? There's no way I could be around it. If it was my daughter that was out there, I can't go talk to you, man. Like, it's literally to that point. The second thing, what happens, and all these, you notice how this always happens on the periphery sports? You don't see it in, like, baseball or basketball or football. If you go women's sports, you don't see this in women's college softball. You don't see some dude that's out there spiking balls and breaking jaws in women's volleyball, right? Because if you see this in, like, let's say a guy went and played on the girls' team at, like, Iowa State and was dropping like 45 and 20 rebounds a game, it would get stopped because it would be it would be more popularized because the sport was more popular. But they only do it on the periphery. They only do it on swimming. They only do it on track. They only do it and see, this is why I think this LPGA thing is going to get serious if this guy gets his card. Now, I think you're going to see a huge problem with it. It's never the major sports, because they know if they let a guy go play a major sport against women and he dominates, it all stops. And if it stops at the top, it's going to stop in the middle.
Well, that's why Lady
stop
Ballers,
in the bottom.
Lady Ballers was the perfect movie.
Yeah. But, like, if you're a parent, neither one of us are parents. Like, how do you go to the track meet and walk around with any sense of pride. That is so embarrassing.
Well, on the daughter side of thing, I would just encourage my daughters, like, hey, you're not taking the field of competition. Like, you have to stand up. Ultimately, it'll be their decision, but that would be my advice. For my son, like, I'm going to love my son no matter what he goes through in life, but we're going to have an honest conversation about you're not going out and you're not competing and wasting trophies that are designed for women's sports. So, Blaine, this is high jumping. Where this is, and he's competed in 4 regular season meets this season and has earned first place every time. He's the only Division II girls competitor in New Hampshire again, just like Dartmouth, who has cracked the 5-foot mark in high jumping this season.
Well, that's not surprising, and this is what I think they're doing. I think if you're going to do this and try to make it normal, you start young, right? You start in high school, you start in middle school, all right? When it comes to periphery sports, that I do agree with you, but I think that's where you start. You start dominating those sports, and then once you make it somewhat normalized in those sports, then you start taking it to bigger sports. We've already seen a trans guy on a volleyball team breaking girls' jaws, spiking.
That was in high school.
That is in high school. All right, this is where you start it. All right, this is like you go after the youth. You normalize the youth in doing this, and then watch it move up. So I would not be surprised if we get to the point where guys are playing on the LPGA, guys are playing in the WNBA. It will get to that point if they keep letting this happen.
Well, here's where I disagree with that. Because if you're somebody that's on the side of this, that thinks it's okay, which I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know anybody who thinks this is okay. I really don't know one person who thinks that men should be competing against women. But if they let it go, even if you start in middle school and high school and get away with it, right? The minute it goes to a major sport, I'm telling you right now, they are worried, if you're on that side, that it is going to be so blatantly obvious and it's going to disrupt the apple cart so much. Let's say Western Michigan, just women's basketball, goes and gets 2 dudes to play against women, and then they go beat Dawn Staley and South Carolina in the Final Four, or they go beat Caitlin Clark and Iowa in the Elite Eight. It's going to be a problem. Now, when you talk about the WNBA, what I find interesting is the only way maybe it works is if dudes start playing against women and they start balling out and dunking, and all of a sudden the WNBA gets more popular and they actually start making money because people are watching the games. I don't think that would happen, but I think the people that support this, all 11 of them, are scared to death. They're scared to death that the minute some dude walks up and is playing against Oklahoma in women's softball and is just knocking people off the mound, or like Tyler Fisher did in Lady Ballers, it all stops. They can only take advantage of it in like juggling. And no offense to these other sports, but they're not major sports, right? Like the minute a dude in the Olympics is let's say a dude is for the Finland women's swimming team, and they go win the gold against the United States and China and all these other people, right, in the Olympics, it all stops. Leah Thomas, there's no chance in hell they let that dude swim against women in the Olympics. Well, there ain't no chance. There's no chance.
As a part-time juggler, I'm offended.
Yeah. Well, look, man, sorry about.
All right, last one up before Tim Brando comes on. I want to talk about this clip you showed me of Stephen A. Smith talking about Cliff Kingsbury's hire. Of course, this is not surprising. This is nothing new, but it still will always be disappointing to me, just because I grew up when ESPN was the premier voice for sports.
We try and give examples of why we started Crane & Company. And so I know people may be saying, well, why are you playing this? Sometimes we just like to show you the difference in, common sense and then the way ESPN approaches things. Let's go ahead and play this clip of Stephen A. Smith talking about Cliff Kingsbury getting hired as the OC as Eric Bieniemy gets fired from the Commanders, who just hired new head coach Dan Quinn from the Dallas Cowboys. Let's play the clip.
But I am not exaggerating when I say this. Cliff Kingsbury, the now former coach for the Arizona Cardinals, I challenge anybody in football to tell me I'm wrong about this. This man is more known for his relationships with quarterbacks and that fly-ass crib he had during the NFL draft when COVID was going on and we saw where he was. He's more known for that than he is for winning football games. We look at a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, and you know what we see as black folks? This is the kind of stuff that don't happen for black folks. So you're in college, right? And you got a good relationship with Kyler Murray. So we got the #1 overall pick, we Arizona. So we're going to hire you because you ingratiated yourself with a kid in this family and you the right guy for the job. That works out for you with 1 playoff appearance in 4 years, okay? And 1 season and winning record. Now we fast forward years later. Now you're the offensive coordinator. Why you get that job? Because they got the number 2 overall pick, and Caleb Williams is talking about, that's my dog. It doesn't seem to me like there are bona fide football reasons as to why Cliff Kingsbury is the new offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders.
First off, okay, Stephen A., you're wrong. You want somebody to tell you you're wrong. This is where Stephen A. really struggles when he's talking about football because I don't think he really understands it.
Yeah.
Like, he understands basketball. Here's what I'll say. As far as the race thing, I think there's some people, the Stephen A. Smiths, the Jamel Hills, and they're on 2 different levels. They're not going to be happy unless every coach and player in the NFL is black.
Yep, you're right.
They're not going to be happy until there's no more white people in sports. That's what they want. The funny part is, like, it's really the most kind of racist way to look at it. Roger Goodell came out and said yesterday, for the first time ever, the NFL is a minority-majority league. 51% of the employees in the NFL are black, Hispanic, or minority. Not white.
Enough,
it's not enough, though. You want 100%. I'm going to get to the Cliff Kingsbury part in a minute. But when 70% of NFL players are African-American, right? The last 8 coaches that got hired, 4 were white, 3 were black, 1 was Hispanic. Like, but the problem is, if this goes away, what are they going to have to talk about? Like, what is Jamel Hill going to have to talk about? Because she can't talk about there's not enough black people in this or black people in that. She has no use to anybody because she's not smart enough to formulate her own thoughts, right? That aren't some type of race baiting or victim or suppression. Second part of this, Stephen A., buddy, there's a big difference between being the head coach and the offensive coordinator. Cliff Kingsbury is known as an offensive mind. The dude puts together really good offenses, and he's just the offensive coordinator. Head coach, like being the president. Offensive coordinator, like being the Secretary of State. 2 totally different jobs. Cliff can focus on what he does best. And using his relationship with the unanimous number 1 overall pick as a bargaining chip to maybe get him to number 2, yeah, that probably helped him get the job a little bit. That's not a bad thing. So it's a bad thing that offensive coordinators have relationships with quarterbacks that are really good? Like, that's a knock on somebody? I don't understand that part, David.
I'm glad that you brought up the difference between being a head coach and an offensive coordinator because I pulled a stat here. Because I'm not convinced that the Atlanta Falcons made a great hire with Raheem Morris. And I hope that I'm wrong because that's my home state. I hope they did a great job. But Raheem Morris got hired to be the Atlanta Falcons head coach. He has 4 years of NFL head coaching experience. So does Cliff Kingsbury. Raheem Morris went 21-38 with a winning percentage of 36%. Cliff Kingsbury 28-37 with a winning percentage of 43%. One of those guys got hired to be the head coach of the Falcons, and the other one got hired to be an offensive coordinator. And I don't remember Stephen A. Smith going off on a rant at how bad of a hire.
And who did Raheem get hired over? I mean, a 6-time Super Bowl winning coach, Bill Belichick.
True.
So, I mean, that's an
anecdotal thing. Sometimes I don't agree that sometimes white guys get hired that are bad, that I think is a bad hire. Sometimes black guys, it's anecdotal. I understand that, but it's turned into exactly what you said, where we're only going to ride for guys who match up with our certain intersectionality.
Yeah. Well, Stephen A. goes on different platforms and says different things. He caters to the audience. He goes to ESPN, race baits. Then he goes on Fox News and Hannity and acts like he's, in the center. I'm a guy that's just, this, that, and the other. He talks out of both sides of his mouth, which is sad. But I guess Antonio Pierce is racist for not hiring Eric Bieniemy now or interviewing Cliff Kingsbury. I guess he's racist.
That was the narrative a year ago about Eric Bieniemy. He was the mind behind the
Something's going on. Something's going on.
Well, you said there was rifting between Eric Bieniemy and players on this team. I mean, you saw
which one? Commanders or
the Commanders?
Oh, okay.
And it was the same thing almost with the Chiefs. And you guys, that's why Eric Bieniemy really never got a head coaching job. The way he treats players.
I didn't hear.
Yeah, I've seen many players come out and to say the way Eric Bieniemy treats players are not really behind it. So I'm not surprised by this firing. You hired Dan Quinn, and remember Eric Bieniemy, the Sam Howell did good, but they were the leading passing team in the NFL. All right, and that's not a Dan Quinn coach. Dan Quinn wants to play defense and run the football.
Yeah, well, I wish he would have played defense against the Packers. But a guy that never has to play defense because he's always on offense, the legend, the Hall of Famer, the glow from the chateau, Tim Brando. Timmy B, what's up?
Happy glow to you from Chateau Brando. Good to be with you.
Hey, well, look, I want to start off. I want to get your thoughts on the Big Ten SEC partnership, take over college football from the NCAA, and then go battle the Klingons for interstellar domination. Is this the first domino that we're seeing to the NCAA being pushed out of the higher levels of college football?
I think so. I think it's a great move. I think it's the start. It's the first step towards self-governance. And these are the two big dogs, and they're the ones that need to lead the way. The reaction, I think, from the casual fans on Twitter was to be expected. Oh, well, this is another. They don't care about us in the Big 12. They don't care about us in the ACC. Stop. Just stop. Now, you can't accomplish anything without those two being in lockstep. Okay, they got to be in lockstep. And so the fact that that story now becomes public, and Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey are, for lack of a better cliche, on the same page. Okay, that's a good thing, because Kevin Warren and Sankey were not. Mike Slive and Jim Delaney were always voting opposite of one another, even though both of them had a healthy respect for one another. As a matter of fact, Jim Delaney recommended Mike Slive to the SEC, and I don't know that a lot of people realize that, but he did when he was leaving Conference USA. I just think it's good that they're talking and they're open with the conversation, saying, okay, what do we need to do now? How do we best go about taking control of this? Because it's clear that Charlie Baker, for all of the wonderful quotes that he's given that have captured the attention of some scribes, the boat has sailed. There's nothing he can do. Mark Emmert ditched that ship about the time he got to the end of the Gulf of Mexico, or halfway through the Pacific. Okay, it just didn't work. And 15 years of kicking the can down the road on NIL was the death nail of the NCAA when it comes to Division I college football. So this is a good thing. And I do believe that Brett Yormark and Jim Phillips and the other commissioners are going to toe the line, and they're going to listen, and the conversation will be free-flowing, and I believe they'll have a voice. But the reality is that the two main dogs are going to control what the future holds from a television standpoint. That's been proven already. Now, from a decision-making process and self-governance standpoint, I think they have to lead the way. And I do think that the conversation will be between every one of the commissioners, even those that are from the so-called group of five. I think they'll be clued in too. I'm in constant contact with several people in administrative roles in intercollegiate athletics. And outgoing Commissioner Mike Oresco with the American Conference is on the television committee for the CFP. Mike's a dear friend, and I think did a hell of a job for the American. Yeah. He's clued in to both of these guys on a regular basis too, and he feels, as I do, that this is a good step. Probably should have happened a little sooner, but because of COVID, that set everything back just a little bit. I mean, it did, and it even brought more unrest between the conferences during that time. They tried to play this we're collegial with one another role in terms of their public relations, but we found out differently when it came time for decisions to be made as to whether there would be a season in 2020. I think this time it's real, and these are two guys that are forward thinking. They come from different backgrounds. Sankey is a guy that, look, I mean, he was a compliance guy for the Southland Conference years ago before he became commissioner. So he's got NCAA background. He was in running the enforcement committee at one time. He's definitely got NCAA background, so he understands the governance issues and the way things need to be handled there. Petitti comes in from a business point of view as a programmer at ABC and CBS, and later an executive producer from a production standpoint at CBS. I worked for him for 9 years, and he's been through the gauntlet already with everything that happened with Michigan last year. It's not as if he can't take bullets He certainly took his fair share last year. I think these two guys, the different strengths that they have working in a collaborative manner can really put something together that's really good. And they're already, the discussion, you may have seen it in Pete Thamel's article and a few other articles out there. 16 is out there, okay?
Yeah.
Who introduced 16? Tony Petitti introduced 16. It makes all the sense in the world from a television standpoint for realignment and for the expansion of the college football playoff. So I think the outlook here is far brighter than people realize. I applaud your soliloquy the other day. I thought it was excellent. And I think that the article that was written by Clay Travis, an Outkick yesterday that I saw, was outstanding. Some of it is way out there in terms of its progression, but I think it needs to be. Okay, the time is now. You're playing catch up. And some of what needs to be done would have to be considered brash and bold at this stage because there's just too much at stake now, and the clock is ticking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you're Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti's young too. You can kind of be his, you have two powers coming together in a partnership. Well, Greg Sankey's kind of like the Obi-Wan, and Tony Petitti's kind of like, Anakin Skywalker.
Tim, I need help, and you're the only man for the job, okay? The National Labor Relations Board ruled that Dartmouth basketball players are employees of the school, now paving the way for an election that would create the first labor union for NCAA athletes. Now, it seems like student athletes were moving towards a model, at least with some college football teams and some college basketball teams that drive a profit, where the athletes can not only profit off of their name, image, and likeness, but can also possibly participate in the revenue sharing, which I think, if implemented correctly, could be a great thing for college athletes. But for the programs that don't drive a profit, if we're moving towards a model where college athletes are employees, are we going to see more and more of these sports programs go by the wayside and be eliminated if they don't make a profit? Like Dartmouth basketball, for instance.
We'll see some things eliminated. Yeah. The issue with this in terms of, I think this is actually big picture good news because it's going to help Sankey and Petitti drive home to everyone involved in college football Division I that the separation from the NCAA has got to take place and that revenue share has got to take place. And they can implement these things and do them without a problem. It's a much bigger issue for the NCAA. Why? Because outside of football and basketball at these major institutions, just about every sports team is operating at a loss. All right. So the NCAA has one thing and one thing only that it can count on to finance these non-revenue producing sports championships, and that's the men's NCAA basketball championship. Again, you can underline men's because the women's does not show the same kind of profit that the men's does, although they just got a big financial hit in their new deal with ESPN. But the reality is the NCAA, that's the body that's in trouble because they do house all of these different sports. Look, collective bargaining is part of what's going to transpire here. Now, I know that shocks you maybe, and it shocks people of my generation and older. But we're in this position because of what? The negligence of the National Collegiate Athletic Association. They did not keep up with the times. This is the price that you pay. As for the lawsuit, I think the ramifications of it are big, and they'll echo, throughout the remainder of this year moving forward. And it could spell trouble for, the soccer teams and the volleyball teams that are out there. Although volleyball is doing really well for the women, as you know. But listen, it's now a business. We all know it's now a business. And if you don't have enough to compete, then you cannot compete. And this streamlining that needed to take place, in my opinion, in the first place. Ohio State's going to have to take a long look at having 36 different teams, even at Ohio State, as big a program as that is, with all of the revenue that it generates. That's a lot. Schools that have already pared down the number of sports that they have done so, I think, with heavy hearts, but understanding what the future holds, David. And so, there are going to be some tough decisions that are made out there, no doubt about it.
No, look, I always say let the free market decide. So if the girls' golf team or if the men's volleyball team or whatever isn't driving a profit, then, I understand that going by the wayside.
Women's sports are screwed then.
It's just tough for me because that was part of my collegiate experience, right? Like being best friends with the baseball players and the water polo players and all that kind of stuff. So it's just going to be ironic to me when the Dartmouth men's basketball team gets what they want and they're called employees and they go into the coach's office and then they say, hey, now we want a salary, and they say, well, no, we're not going to take the endowment from our donors and give it to you. We're going to invest it elsewhere, and now there's no basketball program.
You just said one thing that's a lightning rod statement, okay? When I did this, okay? I got news for you, David. When you or I or anybody else did something, this is a new time, okay? And
it's going to be unfortunate.
During that period of time, a lot of things were going on and mismanagement was taking place. It wasn't necessarily by those athletes that were playing those sports. It was by those athletic departments that were wasting revenue over and over and over again. How many fired coaches? Do we need to go over how much dead money was out there that schools had spent on those coaches, and they hang around, they get an office, right? And I mean, I'm not talking about the football coaches that were paid by boosters. I'm talking about how many senior associate athletic directors can you possibly have on your staff after you fired said coach? It was going on ad nauseum throughout the country. And, everybody's got to shape up or understand that they're going to ship out. Listen, I understand why the media, so much of it, wants to look down its nose in a condescending way when the games are not being played and say, oh, my God, it's the end of the world as we know it. I'm sorry. Much of what they're complaining about, and even to your point about the way you remember it as a player yourself, those Michigan fans didn't know any of those guys or those ladies that you're talking about. They didn't care about any of them, so it doesn't affect them, okay? So the way it used to be, back when I played, which is usually code for your Brando's age or older, okay? You got to forget that. I'm glad, David, you're an old soul and you feel that way. But listen, this is just the grim reality of life today. Dollars aren't spending the way they once did. And that's true in life, and it's true in intercollegiate athletics.
So what do you guys think? Where's the line, basically? Like does it go down to high school? Like my daughter won't be able to play high school sports because that team doesn't make a profit or something?
I don't think it'll bleed down to high school. I really don't.
No, it won't.
Here's what I do know. Here's what I do know. People
I hear
value.
You, David, but I'm telling you, it's not as bad as you think.
Yeah,
it's bad, but it's not as bad as you think.
I know that people value money over feelings a lot of the time. And if there's one thing that can stop any sort of, this needs to be fair for men and women, the women's need to have this many sports. What happens all of a sudden when the school goes, hey man, we're doing really well in football. We got this huge media TV deal, right? We're making a ton of money. And if we get rid of women's golf, we can save this amount of money. Now that we're having to pay the students as student athletes as employees, we can save that amount of money and pump it into the football program to get even nicer stuff to therefore yield more money and double the already tripled profits. If there's anything that can beat the fairness argument or the Title IX argument or any of that stuff that's already getting knocked the hell out anyway, it's we can make more money if we do this. That is just human nature, especially when you get to the top. So I'm going to tell you, I don't know how women's sports
That's
college,
why Title IX was implemented. Because schools would already be doing that. Schools would already be saying, let's eliminate the women's soccer team and get a couple more recruits in.
Well, what's going to stop them now?
What's with Title IX?
But if you start paying them as employees, and now if you go to play women's soccer, you can be on full scholarship and you got to get paid as an employee. Now the school's having to pay even more, and the school's going to be like, man, we just can't do that.
If you're doing that in college, why wouldn't they do that in high school?
Just because college and high school makes the amount of money that is made in college as opposed to high school is so different. And there's so many more high schools than there are colleges. There's so many more kids going to high school than are going to college.
But in Dartmouth's statement here, Dartmouth basketball players said, we don't care how much money's made. We don't care if a profit's made or not.
If any
revenue is generated, we need to be a part of that.
They're not generating any revenue, so then you can't.
They are. They generate revenue. It's not a profit. They still operate at a loss.
Well, then you're not
If I
generating
go pay
revenue.
$5 for a Dartmouth basketball ticket, that's revenue.
Positive revenue. I mean, again, if I go make $5 and I spend $100, I had no revenue on that day. Like, you can't, maybe at Dartmouth at a private school, you can get away with it. Maybe that's why I think they're doing it. But at a public institution, that ain't going to work.
Well,
you going to raise taxes? You going to raise taxes?
Before you guys start putting a fork in women's athletics, okay, let me point out that Angel Reese is making more money than Brock Purdy right now. Okay.
Well, who are they going to play against?
Caitlin Clark is making more money than most, but Angel Reese is making more money than Brock Purdy right now.
Until she goes pro.
Women's sports. Well, yeah, but my point to you is women's sports that are showing a profit are doing just fine, thank you. And why are they doing fine? Because either locally, an ambulance chasing lawyer is going to pay them because of NIL as much money as he wants to pay them, and that's his right. He has an opportunity to do that, and he does it. Good for him. I think that's wonderful. Ooh. But you know what? That's also doing well in the ratings. There's a reason Gus Johnson was doing the game between Iowa and Indiana the other night. There's a reason that ESPN just doled out a lot more money for women's basketball. The NCAA, you think the NCAA doesn't know the end is near? They went and made that new TV deal with ESPN real quick because that's all they've got.
Yeah.
They've got the men's NCAA basketball championship, but it's locked in until 2032. They can't do anything with that for another 10 years. The only way they were going to get any extra cachet was by cutting a new deal for the women's tournament. Now, it's dwarfed by what the men make, but it's additional revenue. Women's volleyball is doing well. Women's volleyball is selling out at places like Nebraska and Wisconsin.
I've seen that.
I mean, it's done very well. Its television ratings have been pretty good. So it's not as though all of women's sports is screwed. It's not. You can't take a blanket look at all of the so-called non-revenue producing sports in your mind, okay, and be correct. You just can't. You got to look at the bottom line on what they are achieving now. They don't have men's baseball at Nebraska, okay? At Wisconsin. They have it at Nebraska. They don't have men's baseball at Wisconsin. It's a weather situation. They don't do it. I remember talking to Pat Richter about it. Gosh, it's a shame. Big Ten has had some programs, Michigan, when they made it to the World Series. I remember that back in 1984. But certain schools just know it's not fiscally the right thing to do. And that's why Wisconsin, they have a hockey team. They don't have a college baseball team. Those kinds of decisions now have got to be made at different schools based on running their business the way they deem their business should be run. And I think most of us that have covered intercollegiate athletics for, 5 decades or more as I have, I've always felt that way. I've seen the waste. Okay, I've seen it. Now they just need to trim the fat and they need to start running their business the way it should be run. And now because the players want a piece, players deserved a piece of the action a long time ago. Instead of Chuck E. Cheese inside the Clemson Athletic Facility or Niagara Falls inside the Alabama football facility, that money should be spent in better ways. And some of those better ways is taking care of the players. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. And when people say those kids don't care or that they're not in school, that's the other thing. They're not even in school. I go to these practices and I visit with these players. Some of the best times of my life, okay, in the job I have is getting to know these young guys. And thank God some of the sports information people will put Spencer and me or my buddies that are working basketball with me in front of those players. And we get to talk to them, okay? And they'll tell us about some of the challenges. And, yeah, they may be taking some courses online now. It's not the way it once was, okay? You don't have an assistant coach in a golf cart necessarily that's going to follow said player from class to class to make sure he goes, a la Charles Barkley and Mac McCarthy back in the day at Auburn, all right? But they are going to class, and they do care about their futures beyond just basketball. But there's some money to be made, and they understand it, they see it. And it's about time the people that are wearing the suits took care of that end of their business. Because right now, those poor coaches out there wearing whistles around their necks don't know from one day to the next how they're going to put a roster together.
Yeah.
All right. So it's time now for the people that are in the business of college athletics, operate the business of college athletics the way it should be. And I think that we're moving in that direction. And to me, that's good.
Yeah.
To me, that's really good.
Definitely. Well, Timmy B, we got to roll. We got to get to phone calls, my friend. But great stuff. You're the perfect person to have on. I know you guys got some big game this weekend and some college hoops, Big East, which I've really enjoyed. The way UConn's playing right now, they look dangerous once again. But, man, thanks so much for joining us. Real quickly, where are you going to be this weekend?
I've got Xavier and Creighton, a good one on Fox, 3 o'clock on Fox. The following week, I go back up to UConn. They're going to have to give me a letter jacket, I think.
Yeah, they will.
So many UConn games.
Are you just going to start staying with the Hurleys?
Yeah. You know what? Danny's really become media savvy this year.
Yeah.
He's getting thrown out of fewer games. He's doing interviews.
Well, he won a natty. He won a natty, Tim. A little bit of the pressure. It's a little bit of it.
He's got a better seat at the table now. He's not just Big Bobby's son and Little Bobby's brother. He's now got a national championship.
Exactly
You're right. And he's got the most complete team in the country. I think both Purdue and Connecticut, just this past week or two, have now separated themselves a little bit from the rest of the lot. We'll see. There's a lot to be heard. Tennessee's playing really well. We know that. North Carolina, I think, is undervalued. Hubert Davis is doing a great job. But those two teams who play completely differently, okay? I mean, those are two completely different teams. But they're both, I think, taking steps to separate themselves from everybody else. But, yeah, I've got UConn in 2 weeks against Marquette. Talk about a great game.
For sure.
Marquette's a top 10 team, and they'll be at UConn on the 17th. But this week it's Xavier and Creighton.
Definitely. Well, Timmy B, thanks so much, my friend.
Be good, fellas. Always a pleasure.
All right. The Hall of Famer, Tim Brando. All right, going to get to the Booster Club in a second. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. But let's go in and get to the phones.
All right, we got Michael on the line in Texas. Michael, how you doing?
Good morning, guys. How are y'all doing today?
What's up, man? Sorry for the wait.
No worries. It was a great conversation that y'all had with Timmy there. I wanted to talk about when you brought up the Ohio State thing. I think this coming season will be a perfect test of contrast of styles between Michigan and Ohio State. On the one hand, we've seen Michigan, they don't get the 5 stars, but they develop, and last season was just a perfect recipe of the development and experience. And then on the other hand, we've seen what Ohio State has done recently with they're getting the 5-star recruits, but then they're also bringing all this talent with the money, which Blaine, you brought up the whole Texas A&M comparison. Their athletic director used to be athletic director at A&M to begin with, so he kind of brought that thing. Looks like he brought that thinking over to Ohio State. So this coming season is going to be a perfect test of how those styles clash and which one is going to win out this coming year.
Yeah, the contrast I make, though, is I do think it's a big difference. I mean, you look at the amount of transfers Ohio State's brought in. It's not an inordinate amount. They're just very high level, and they were some of the biggest names. A&M wasn't winning. They were going 8-4. What their best year was during COVID, right? They went 8-2, something like that. This Ohio State team is winning double-digit games every single season. They just can't get past Michigan. And even when they've lost to Michigan, they made the 14 playoff and almost beat Georgia. I just think where Jimbo is and where Ryan Day is and where both these programs are, and even with the new additions, where these conferences are, I feel like it's a little bit of a different situation. That's a very good point about Ross Bjork going from Texas A&M to Ohio State. But I think it just smells like you had to change something. You had to mix it up, and bringing in these high-profile guys at very high-profile positions and very important positions is a smart way to go. I mean, I get it. It makes sense to me.
Well, hey, Jake, I would say this. When Harbaugh went through the contract, I would call it reduction, not really extension, he overhauled his coaching staff, and look what that got Michigan. Ohio State, I didn't hear much, besides Bill O'Brien being brought in, I didn't hear much else about their coaching staff being overhauled. So you wonder how that's going to work out. Well,
I mean, again, yeah, you overhauled the staff, but Urban Meyer also left Ohio State. Like, I think we got to remember that, too. I mean, that was a huge turning point for Jim Harbaugh. If Urban Meyer would have stayed, I don't think this run happens, if we're going to be honest with you.
I think it still does.
Yeah, of course you do. But now
Urban Meyer was the kryptonite, man. He couldn't beat him.
Yeah,
I mean, Blaine,
there's a lot of moving parts.
Blaine, you kind of brought this point up earlier when you're talking about the type of transfers that the Buckeyes are getting in, and it got me thinking, the quarterback position is not really one that we've seen them have brought transfers in. They usually develop that position. Now, Justin Fields did come in from Georgia, but he didn't start at Georgia. He came in before he was a starter. Other than that, almost every quarterback the Buckeyes have had on their roster, they've developed. So much so, they send other quarterbacks out to go have success. Joe Burrow, Quinn Ewers, right? So now they're bringing in a guy, not just getting Julian Sayin to like flip and, hey, in a couple years you'll be ready. No, our season depends on how Will Howard goes, and you have to come in right now and be that dude.
Yeah, and you needed to go well early.
Yeah,
in my opinion, if you drop one early, then it could start spiraling. Look, all these pieces are great, but I mean that wasn't even the weakness, in my opinion, when you look at Ohio State. I mean, other than Kyle McCord, who had great numbers, I mean, your offensive line was the weakness at Ohio State, and I don't see many transfers coming in for that. But then you kind of look at Kentucky with the one and dones, right? The one and dones, and what has Kyle really won? They're nothing. So we'll see. I mean, this is the new formula. Ohio State, look, you're bringing in all this talent, but this talent has to win, and this talent has to come together to win the big games. And we saw what Michigan does. They recruit these guys. They put them through their system. Year 3, year 4, they look like the way they are. But it's going to be a little bit different for Michigan this year. This is what you run into when you lose this many guys, right? Now it's going to be a bounce-back year almost for Michigan.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, Ohio State went 11-1. Went 11-1 during the regular season. So, they're adding Quinshon Judkins, Will Howard. Could it be the case? And Kyle McCord did have good numbers, but we saw Clemson have a great run of quarterbacks and then miss on a guy. And what happened with DJU? Now they're still trying to find it. We see this happen with other teams. Maybe Ohio State finally missed on a quarterback, and he went 11-1, and there's a reason I think he transferred to Syracuse. Devin Brown's not doing it, so they brought in a guy that could kind of be that stopgap guy in Will Howard as Julian Sayin gets ready to be able to be the next one. I mean,
so they didn't miss with C.J. Stroud.
No.
They didn't. No. That's
but the result was the same.
Again, but if we're saying that Kyle McCord was the problem last year.
I don't think he was. That's
I said the offensive line was the problem. But you returned both your tackles and your center. You had 2 new tackles and a center. Like, we're going to talk about Michigan developed these guys and they got ready. You can't say that on one hand, and then all of a sudden when Ohio State returns 2 tackles and a center, say, oh, well, that doesn't matter. It's still going to be a problem.
Well, I saw Michigan produce on the field. I haven't seen these guys produce.
But Ohio State went 11-1. What are we talking about? Didn't produce on the field.
Michigan, but when they've lost to
Michigan,
we're talking about them beating Michigan.
Yeah, but they went 11-1. What? You can't say they didn't produce on the field. They lost 1 game.
What was the weak point of Ohio State?
The one game they lost was on the offensive line a little bit. And now they're returning basically the whole offensive line. If we're going to complain about 11-1 and say that's not producing on the field, right? Then I don't know what we're doing. Then I really don't know what we're doing.
But if the one game they've lost the last couple of years has been to the same team because of the same reason, which we've said throughout the fall, lack of physicality, then don't you think the offensive line is the place or defensive line is the place you should shore up the most?
Yeah, well, I don't think they lost 2 years ago because lack of physicality. I think their ass lined up in zero coverage 4 times and let Michigan beat them one-on-one and hit a few home runs. I was more impressed with what Michigan did defensively with what they had, and I do know they returned some guys, but Ohio State's getting older on offense as well. I just think this year, Ohio State has a humongous advantage with what Michigan has lost, with what Ohio State is returning. But, again, we talked about there's one game on that schedule you can't lose the most, just like when you're at Auburn and just like you're at Alabama. The only reason we're talking about this, the only reason that this is a problem is because they've lost to Michigan 3 years in a row. And if they do it again this year, like I said, I think they're in trouble. But I just want to make sure that we remember they went 11-1. They went 11-1 and lost the game against Michigan in the last 5 minutes on the road and then missed the playoff. So I just want to, again, just make sure that we remember that.
I don't think anybody's forgot.
No. I'm talking to the audience. That's what I'm talking to. But Michael, thank you, man.
Appreciate it, Michael. All right, let's go to John in Birmingham, Alabama. John, how you doing?
John.
Yo, good morning, guys.
What's up, dude?
Y'all, I was listening to the show after work yesterday. Y'all had me rolling at the Dmitry Petrovich reference, man.
Thank you. Somebody got it.
Growing up.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people in the audience know about that, but That was my childhood. If you didn't have Pablo Sanchez and Keisha Phillips on your team, I don't know what you're doing, man.
Pete Wheeler, 5'2" guy.
Oh yeah, that's true too. He was
dumber
fast,
than a box of rocks.
Man, we might miss that. Anyway, I was calling in because been seeing this girl recently. So
somebody take the binoculars out of your truck.
Yeah, no, but anyway, so yeah, it's going pretty well. But one there's a catch, Jake, and she's an Alabama fan.
Okay.
So I need some advice from you. Married to a gal from Tuscaloosa.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of worried about what happens when we get to the fall and it's still going on. Wonder if you can give some advice, man.
Well, Cone can give you perspective on this too. I mean, Cone's not an Auburn guy, but he can give you perspective on married an Alabama fan. Here's the question, John. How, there's levels to it. How much of an Alabama? Are we talking about like as much as you're an Auburn fan, she's an Alabama fan?
Well, she didn't go to Alabama, but I'm an Auburn alum. So, I mean,
that's Well, my wife didn't go to Alabama, but she's from Tuscaloosa. So is she like diehard Alabama? Like it really matters to her a lot?
Well, I mean, she said she is, but I don't know. Like, we'll see what happens. I mean, she's
here's what I'll say.
I don't know, but
here's what I'll say. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. I love football.
Yeah.
I love it. But I love another thing a lot more. And that's why I would not rub it in. I try and tiptoe around it a little bit. But see, the problem with me is like we haven't beat them while I've been with her, and we've given up 2 leads at home. It's I don't know what it's like to beat Alabama while we've been together in football. But here's what I say: don't rock the boat too much. There's a lot of inside excitement that happens during the game when Auburn does well. But again, I know you love football like I do, but there's some things that I love more than football, and I think you know what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. I will say, though, the one time I've been associated with Auburn and we won the Iron Bowl was in 2019. I don't know how I would be able to just sit there on the couch and be internally excited, if she's watching it, so.
Yeah, well,
if you really love her, you rub it in her face as much as possible.
Hey, that's coming from somebody that's not married. That's coming from a single man.
That is what you do, buddy.
Marion.
Yeah, does she cook your food? Yeah, I would just remember you have to sleep with this person.
Life's short, buddy.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a lot shorter when she puts cyanide in your green beans.
Marion, an Alabama girl, that's the greatest decision I've ever made.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, John.
I came from a house divided, so
there you go.
Yeah, you got practice.
There you go. All right, so it runs in the blood. Appreciate it, John. Have a good one, man. Hold down Birmingham for us, all right?
Yeah.
Last caller today, Josh in North Carolina. Josh, what's the word?
I got bronchitis, but I have too much hatred. I have too much hatred in my heart to not talk about the Duke being beat again in basketball.
Yeah.
And this just goes to further show you that Duke, when the time matters most, they'll crumble and fall. And they've always been the little brother ever since they lost in the Final Four. So just hold the L, and then we'll see you again in March and probably give you another L. And, we'll be, washing our hands in that. But anyways, I also wanted to talk about the NASCAR documentary. I don't know if y'all have seen it yet, but finally watched it, and it made me realize I need to get back into watching NASCAR again. And my dad also agrees with me, but the problem with what's up? Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say the only problem is we don't really have a loyalty to a team or a driver because, I mean, when we were watching it, we were just watching it. We didn't really root for anybody. So I guess my question to, y'all in the Booster Club was, is there any, one driver besides the guy that drives the Hooters car, Chase Elliott, I think? Is there any other driver we need to be rooting for here, or should we just watch just to watch?
Yeah, look, there's a good rancher's car swimming around racing right now that you should root for. But look, outside of Chase Elliott, I would probably say Chase Elliott. That's who I would root for.
What about Kyle Larson?
Yeah, look,
Our boy called in love Kyle Larson.
That is true. I don't know, Joe. Why can't you jump on the Chase Elliott train, dog? What's wrong with that?
Oh, there's nothing wrong with it. I was just saying, besides the Hooter point, I mean, there's.
Is there anyone else?
I will say. So I was watching the documentary, and there's one guy that stood out to me. Just because his attitude, like the way he carried himself, I'm like, you know what? This guy is like, he's not, ultimately cocky and brash, but I believe his name's Christopher Bell. Like, I mean, just watching the documentary, I could tell, I'm like, he's different from these other cats that are like really cocky and arrogant. And I'm like, I kind of jive with that guy. But other than that, and then the other guy, there's a guy that came up on sim racing, apparently. I think it's like Byron, I think is his name. That guy interested me too. But I mean, other than that, those are the two that stood out to me. But anyways, yeah, it'll be a fun time. And, Daytona's in a week and a half, and can't wait to go back to watching NASCAR and probably going to Bristol and Darlington this year. So
God, I love
it. A lot of fun.
I was a big Tony Stewart guy back in the day.
Yeah, I didn't mind Tony Stewart. I mean, I grew up with Jeff Gordon doing his thing. Obviously, Jimmy Johnson did it after. But Josh, congrats on the dub on Tobacco Road up there.
Hey, thank you, man.
All right, brother. Tennessee is playing really well. But speaking about playing really well, all right, Raycon headphones, all right, they're anything but ordinary. They always play well. They show up 100% of the time. They're sleek, they're comfortable, and they're designed for the ultimate audio experience. Not just a tool, they're a mood enhancer and a companion that transforms anything we use for them. They feel like an extension of ourselves. They got optimized gel tips for that perfect ear-end fit. You love to see it. Ensuring a snug fit without any discomfort, which is big, especially if you run in them. It gives you 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life. And they're priced just right. All right, there's some headphones out there that are high quality, but they're way, way overpriced. Raycon is super high quality, and it is the best deal around. So whether you're sweating out in the gym, strolling through the park, or immersed listening to Crane & Company, these headphones stay securely in place, letting us forget we even wear them. We all use them. We love them here. So right now, if you go to buyraycon.com/booster, that's BUYRAYCON.com/booster, you get 15% off your Raycon order plus free shipping. That is buyraycon.com/booster to score 15% off and free shipping. Buyraycon.com/booster. All right. Bets, Booster Club with Donos, friendship, togetherness, emotions. Here we go. Yesterday, how did you boys do yesterday?
Well, 1-1.
2-0.
That a boy. Did Baby come pick Kansas State? Or did you pick Kansas State?
He picked Kansas State +5. So he hit that. I took the under 146, and it was 75-7.
In my
by 1 point it hit.
And it went overtime.
And then I took the under in the Miami UVA game.
I did too.
That was 68,
yes.
60-38.
It was 98. That was
Virginia held Miami to 38 points.
That's ridiculous.
Virginia's defense, I mean, Tony Bennett, they're just out there playing defense. They struggle to shoot. They struggle to score, but, man, they really play defense. Yesterday was 2-0. Want to give a shout-out to McNeese State. Will Wade. Love to see it. And then I got the under 2 in the Miami game. Tonight, it's an all-SEC affair. South Carolina. Woo! Who's hotter than two sumo wrestlers next to a campfire. I'm going to take them -4.5 at home. It's going off at -108. And then Kentucky going to play Vanderbilt. Tell you what, Coach Cal. I mean, you're making your boy look pretty smart. I've been saying this for many, many years. Nobody does less with more than John Calipari and Charmin Ultra. But give me Kentucky, -8.5 on the road in Memorial tonight. That's -108 as well. David, scream at me.
I'll be honest with you. I love both of those picks. I'm going to trail you on the South Carolina one. Bet buds tonight. South Carolina -4.5. That's -108. Then I'm going to take Dayton -2. -110.
Lanye.
1-1 yesterday. God, I mean, Kansas 12-point lead just fall apart. But hey, Idaho, great job.
Dude, they beat the hell out of them, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Give me Texas Tech +5.5. They're on the road against Baylor. I do think Texas Tech keeps this game close, though. Central Michigan.
Your boys.
Wagon. Absolute.
He was right. That's been a great call. You've been betting on them for like 3
absolute wagons this year covering the spread. They're on the road at Toledo +14.5. Give me that all day.
All right, Ace, speaking about North Carolina, he's going to go Tar Heels -7. They're playing really, really well. Hubert Davis looking like a very valuable replacement for the legendary Roy Williams. And then, Bet Buds, Kentucky minus 8.5 on the road against Vandy. Man, I almost took the over here because Kentucky can't defend anybody but Vanderbilt. I mean, they couldn't score with Gorlock.
That Tennessee game, what was that, 103 to 90 something? Wow. Also, Oklahoma BYU tonight.
Yep.
Iowa State Texas tonight. A lot of good
games.
I mean, college basketball is crazy right now. All right, let's get to the Booster Club.
All right, Chase Mills with a $10 donation. Appreciate it, Chase. He says, big one for OU men's hoops tonight at home against the Fighting Mormons. Need a 2-0 week this week. Desperately really feel like we're going to get real out of left field and maybe national championship team this year.
Oklahoma's not a national championship basketball team. Listen, I hate to say this, Chase. You know I got mad love for you, brother. But Oklahoma, it seems like they lose pretty much every big game that they play in. I like Porter Moser, one of the top 3 coolest names I've heard for a college basketball coach. It's pretty dope. But I don't believe. I don't think you have enough. I don't think you have that guy that can elevate and take you to a national championship.
All right, let's go to T Guns with the $5 donation. He says, guys, my 7-year-old daughter won her first wrestling tournament pool Sunday.
Let's go.
Pin the boy and tech fall the other girl. Give it up. Woot. Woo.
Let's go.
Hey,
Congratulations. And you know what? 7 years old, totally fine.
Well, that's when girls are stronger than
17 years old, not cool. I mean, we all saw what Blaine did in Lady Ballers, but congratulations.
Let's go to Chad Smith, the man with the most normal name ever. $5 donation. Appreciate it. R.I.P. Toby Keith.
Yes.
Lucky to be around him on a golf course several times. He was such a down-to-earth person and meant a ton to Norman / the Oklahoma
hated to see
community.
That.
All right, let's go to Steve's Trading Card Frenzy with a $5 donation. Got to get you those headshots, Steve's. He says, there are certain coaches where you can give them a Hall of Famer at every position and they still can't win. Is Ryan Day one of those coaches?
No. We'll see. We'll see this year.
Okay, let's go to Jimbo's Money Bag. $5 donation. Appreciate it. Jimbo built no culture when at A&M.
Yep.
He catered to everyone's individual egos. Yep. It's a toxic situation. Just like my handle, he still got the bag, though.
Yeah, look, $80 million buyout. God, fire me for $80 million. Fire me into the sun for $80 million.
All right, let's go to the last one of the day. Heartbroken Hog with a $2 donation. He says, Jake, I need my flowers for being right about Devo Davis.
Yeah, he left last year and then came back as well. It seems like a yearly thing. I'm trying to remember, and Heartbroken, you're going to know this. I'm trying to remember if they started. I know Arkansas was up and down a little bit early last year. But when Devo left and then came back, was that when they started playing better? I can't remember that off the top of my head or not.
So the love triangle, has that been debunked?
It's been debunked. Well, that's why we said allegedly and rumor and stuff like that. I believe, Jack McGuire, our friend, talked about it a little bit. There were some Arkansas fans, even Arkansas's athletics YouTube page was talking trash about us talking about it, like making fun of, the way I look personally, which...
Was that their official page?
That was their official page. Yeah. Called us like a garage network. They got 23,000 subs. So if we're a garage, I mean, y'all are basically, pooping on the street.
They called us a garage network?
Yeah. It's like y'all got 23,000 subs. Maybe y'all should worry about having a major sports program that actually does anything that matters. You're about to fire your football coach. Basketball's a disaster. Baseball, y'all are pretty good. You still can't win the damn thing. So maybe y'all should... I wouldn't be talking about people's appearance.
I wonder
either.
what that person looks like behind that.
Yeah, well, listen, there's a lot of people that can talk about the way people look, and I love Arkansas and Arkansas fans, and I'm from the state of Alabama. We're not the best. But, buddy, I can promise you it's not Arkansas because the pigs just aren't on the farm over there.
All right, quickly, Christopher Simmons with a $10 donation. Appreciate it. Christopher Bell's car is sponsored by my company. He was at our event last week. He's a huge Boomer Sooner and loves college football and loves Crane and Company.
Wow. All right, well, now I'm rooting for him.
There it is.
Well, now I'm rooting for him. There you go, Josh. Look what you started.
All right, great job today, chat. Let's get to the poll. What was Toby Keith's best song? And look, I know he has a lot of bangers, and I only have 4 options. Okay.
I get it.
So give me a break. Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue. Mm-hmm. All right. Beer for My Horses.
Oh, yeah.
Should Have Been a Cowboy.
Oh.
And Other.
It's got to be Should Have Been a Cowboy.
Other's going to take a lot of votes.
I'm going to say Should Have Been a Cowboy 53%.
I'll say courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue. They're just going to probably go pro-America as much as possible. 48%.
All right, Other, 11%.
Wow, that's
Beer for My Horses, 13%. Should Have Been a Cowboy, 26%. Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, 45%.
Wow,
Yeah.
they went
so many good songs.
But a lot of other ones.
How Do You Like Me Now?
How Do You Like Me Now?
Red Solo Cup.
Yeah.
That's actually one I don't care for. Though.
Yeah, that one.
Well,
I feel like
it's
he
a good
wrote that
song,
one.
but it's
like
not
on,
one of his best.
Well, I feel like he wrote that one like on South Park when like Randy's like writing songs while he's going to the bathroom and like playing his Lord. I feel like
Just
Toby
gets up
Keith
there
is in
and-
the bathroom.
I'm gonna listen to Toby Keith the rest of the day.
There's poor
man.
britches.
As
Yeah,
good as
those-
I once was is good.
Yeah, that's
Good
what
as
I
I
was
once
thinking of.
was.
That's he said steamy Ray Johnson. He said,
They-
no, you're thinking of Stevie Ray.
They steal the britches during the episode. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! All right, make sure you subscribe. We appreciate you guys. Thanks to Tim Brando. Got John Fanta coming on Thursday to talk some college hoops as well. Gonna be I want a Fanta. We're gonna be talking Super Bowl as well. Letting that line move a little bit. Gonna really dissect that. May have a super special guest coming on to talk a little Super Bowl. So we appreciate you guys and like the chances of Dartmouth basketball turning a profit. We're going.
Dude, rough day.
Gone. Gone.